welcome to the Friendly Aussie podcast.
Hello.
Hello, and welcome to the Friendly Aussie podcast.
Yeah, thanks for tuning in, everybody. We're here with Beck from, I guess, Australia, but you've been to the US and had many different experiences in the US, right?
Yes, I have. Yeah. Moved back in December, but I've lived in the US in Portland, Oregon for 2 years. But before that, I was involved with Weeded Warrior and started that in 2015. Here in Australia, advocating for veterans' access to medicinal cannabis.
Oh, dope, yeah.
So we, for many years, educated veterans on medicinal cannabis, how it could help them, how they could manage their PTSD and all their pain. And we also advocated politically. So we got it, DVA now, the Department of Veterans Affairs, now covers medicinal cannabis for veterans, and then the only people in Australia who can actually access cannabis.
Fantastic.
Paid for, yeah.
Yeah, well, that's a massive, massive win.
Yeah, it's huge. I mean, it's still difficult, but it can happen.
I was just going to ask, do they cover that on their, like, I don't know what the veterans get, like their packages when they're kind of like out of the army?
Yeah,
what do they call that? They're medical, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, it's like I said, it's difficult to get. You still have to have it, like, they're only covering for pain, whereas originally it was almost for any condition. And obviously, like, we were campaigning for PTSD. That's predominantly what we were looking after, you know, veterans who had, you know, very serious PTSD. So that's what we were originally advocating for. But then over time, they sort of like, you know,
Scaled it back
and was like, oh, it's only for pain because there's no evidence to say that it's, you know, good for PTSD, which is crazy.
Very typical of Australian government.
It is, yeah, absolutely. People are so scared to use cannabis, and particularly THC, for mental illness. I have found it to be incredibly beneficial for those who have really serious anxiety, depression, PTSD, and that is exactly what I'd be recommending for them. Fuck CBD for that, like, we need to have THC. It's more about how we dose with it, and that's what I feel like here in Australia when we're talking medicinal cannabis, people need to understand, like, dosing. We are not out to get you as high as you possibly can. Like, you know, there's a really big difference. You can use THC and still be very functional throughout the day. But we need to change. We need to have these conversations, and we need to sort of, you know, get people educated.
At the very least, it's kind of bullshit that there's no ability for people who are experiencing, you know, even mild to chronic pain or any different kind of condition, lifelong condition, that they don't have the option ultimately to go down that path in a lot of circumstances, even though we've got a legal framework. You know?
Yeah. So I'm, like, currently in that situation of trying to get a medical script through a doctor. I have worked with this medicine for 10 years. I have, as I said, been in the States working with patients for 2 years. I know this medicine. I know how to talk to doctors about it. And yet I've had 4 doctors so far completely, like, just shut down the conversation. Jeez. Like, they will not give me a referral to go see a cannabis doctor.
That's incredible.
You know, and I'm like, I'm someone who knows this medicine. I can't even begin to imagine how difficult and frustrating it would be for patients out there who are, we're in this situation of having to educate doctors. That is not what patients should be doing, you know, and that's why the pharmaceutical industry is not working here. We've had 30,000 scripts, you know, given out, and that's, you know, recurring, like, patients. That's not 30,000 patients. That's 30,000 scripts. So you've got patients who've had maybe 7 scripts, you know, that are all part of that.
They're all monopolizing treatment because in some ways, you know, you could say that there's a real utility to pharmaceuticals in certain contexts. But the way they're being applied, it's like they're just being given to people in all contexts, regardless of what's going on with them specifically. In a lot of cases, cannabis could help.
Absolutely.
Other treatments could help, you know?
Yeah. And I guess that's sort of the work that I do is that, you know, people are coming to me being like, I'm on all these different medications. I don't want to be on all these medications. Every time I go to the doctor, I'm there for 10 minutes and all they want to do is give me more. You know, 10 minutes is truly, like, I mean, that's a long time. Most people are not even getting that.
For sure.
And to be honest, I think, you know, the reason why I do my work and why it's so successful is because, you know, I'm on the phone to them listening to people for half an hour, 45 minutes, and I'm giving them their time.
Yeah.
And so many people are out there, particularly in this time during COVID, have extreme anxiety, extreme depression, and they just need some help. They don't want to continue to be medicated. And I've had so many people coming to me saying, hey, I've gone to my doctor, I'm feeling really anxious, and they've just given me a script for, you know, an antidepressant or whatever, and I don't want to go down that. Please help me, you know? And so that's the work that I do. And most of the time it's just listening to them, and they'll get off the phone and be like, and they'll say to me, oh, I just really need, like, I feel so much better having just spoken to you and had someone listen to me. But then they're also getting the medicine that they couldn't get from their doctor, and then they're able to feel better, you know, and they're able to be in control. They're not a slave to pharmaceuticals and having to take that pharmaceutical every single day. And if they don't, then that messes with their brains and their moods.
Yeah.
You know, cannabis is something that you can take, you know, when you need to. In the moment, you know, it definitely does not have to be an everyday thing.
That is definitely the biggest thing I think I have an issue with pharmaceuticals is, like, if you go on antidepressants, you need to use them for fucking forever.
Once you're on it, you're on it. And it's so, and this is a conversation that is not spoken about enough. It is so, so difficult to withdraw once you've been on those antidepressants for multiple years.
Or even to switch meds.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's, that was a big part of what got me into advocating for veterans. It's because as a caregiver, I was a caregiver for 8 years for my former partner. And I was talking to other women, other partners and wives of veterans who, you know, their veteran would go to their psychologist or psychiatrist, they would put them on an antidepressant, and then 2 weeks later they'd go back and be like, oh, I'm not really feeling great with this one, whatever. Oh, here's another one. Oh, here we'll just increase it. We'll just change it, you know, and then they're sending the veteran home to a family, you know, with children and all. In it, like, truly it's dangerous. It is dangerous to change these medications on these veterans and to not actually be watching them and to just think that it's okay for their wives and their loved ones and their families to like bear the brunt of the psychosis and all the shit that they go through. It's not safe.
We don't take the Hippocratic Oath seriously.
Oh my gosh. I may have yelled at one of the doctors the other day who refused to have a conversation. I was just like, where's this oath that you signed up to? Like, where's this first do no harm? You know, the fact that you will not even have this conversation with me or any one of your patients, you're letting them down. Yeah.
For sure.
I think with, like, the do no harm, do you think a police charge is harm?
Sorry?
So do you think a police charge would be harm?
Oh, 100% it is.
So, like, to me, the whole thing is, it's like, if the doctor's not willing to prescribe this medication that they know that this patient is having outside of the legal framework, where's the actual duty of care?
Exactly.
Like, it really doesn't fundamentally make sense. It's very, 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 very fucking broken.
It's just a complete admission that a lot of GPs out there, they just don't have the time or the patience or willingness to understand a new framework and a new kind of way of doing medicine.
Absolutely.
So they're sticking to the old paradigm because that's not only profitable, but that's what's encouraged. If you step out of line in the medical community and start to, you know, be one of those medicinal cannabis doctors, well, then people look at you a certain way. There's a stigma attached to it.
Oh my gosh. I'm very good friends with a cannabis doctor who is experiencing exactly that. And that's wrong. Like, I can't understand, like, you know, doctors won't even write scripts to him, knowing full well that he's in, like, the same area as them. They will not write a script for their patients to go see him, even though their patients are saying, hey, we want to go see this doctor.
That's true.
They flat out refuse because they don't believe that what he is doing is right.
Wow.
I'm like, it's not up to you, you know? I don't believe that the drugs that you hand out like candy is right, you know? But at the same time, I feel like we need to have doctors on board. I feel like here in Australia, we absolutely need to be, you know, campaigning for a dispensary model.
Totally.
And we need to have doctors on our side. They are part of that model. I absolutely believe that we need them.
Sure.
What we don't need is the pharmaceutical board. We do not need the pharmaceutical industry involved in this in any way whatsoever. And I think that's hugely disappointing that that's where the Australian government has gone and the way that they've done it. Given that I was one of the people who did fight and work really hard for many years to have it legalized. You know, I actually feel like I'm part of the problem, to be honest. You know, for so many years, you know, especially if you talk to those who are in Nimbin, who have been in this for such a long time, you know, they've been campaigning for many years, even well before I came into it. But, you know, you sit down with all the doctors, with all the politicians, and you show them the medicine that you're using and you tell them all the stories, and they're like, oh my gosh, this is so amazing what you do. Thank you so much. Like, thank you for bringing this to our attention. Don't you worry. We'll look after you. We'll make sure that this gets across the line. And then what do? They go and legalize oil, and now you can get flour, but it's gamma radiated. It's come from overseas. It's shit quality. You cannot call that medicine. And where is the RSO? Where is the treatment for cancer? Why is it that if you do get flour, you have to vaporize it? You know, there is nothing, like, medicine is still a joint. You can still use medicine out of a water pipe. That is all medicine. Everyone has a different way of wanting to medicate, and the government should not be getting in the way and just be saying these are the only two options that you have. Yep. And even then, like, you know, CBD, they consider that to be more medicine than THC. And when it comes to the scheduling, they've even like separated them. Instead of, you know, rescheduling cannabis, they've rescheduled like THC separately to CBD. You cannot do that.
The fucking activists who, like, they broke their backs to get across the line. People that were working on the ground to get this medicinal cannabis stuff through Parliament. Honestly, it was not their fault, in the sense that the Parliament itself decided to throw away a bill that would create its own agency for, you know, regulating not only the consumption, but the production, manufacturing, dosage, all of that stuff. And it would be integrated with the health industry. Basically what you're talking about. With medicine. It would be something that integrated with doctors in a seamless way. Instead, what do you have? A TGA certification. And the TGA, the Therapeutic Goods Administration, they're in charge of scheduling. So they basically have an incentive to make sure that this shit doesn't get out.
Exactly.
You know? It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
It's really ridiculous.
I mean, many years ago, when this was being legalized in around 2016, 2017, the TGA was like, they ideally wanted it to be 5 companies only.
Yeah, fucked.
You know, and that's running a monopoly, right? Like, that's not...
it's mafia shit.
Yeah, that's not how it should be. We need, like, mum and pop shops. We need to be supporting our growers. That is 100... We all need to be getting behind our growers 100%. We need to be demanding that they're obviously not using PGRs, because that is really bad. We need to be growing in soil. We can grow indoors and outdoors organically in soil and grow a far, far better product than what's, you know, all this PGR shit is. But we need to be supporting our growers to do that.
That's true. You've got the licensing arrangements for the large scale growers, and you've got the, you know, you can grow a thing in your backyard if you're just a small scale.
Absolutely.
Thing. I think there even needs to be that kind of middle ground. I really would like to see the enthusiast, hobbyist growers kind of like have the ability to
get into the industry.
Yeah,
absolutely. That's what I'm saying. By supporting the growers, we need to support them to be a business. And when they get taken out, or when the growers or the suppliers get taken out, we need to like band together and fight for them. We need to like... I know that it seems archaic that we're still in this time, but we need to be writing to our local politicians and saying, hey, this guy just got done. This guy is providing medicine to people. Whether you see it as medicine or not, because whether it's pharmaceutical provided or not, it's still medicine and it's still keeping, certainly in this corona time, you know, mental illness and anxiety has skyrocketed. Literally, this is what I'm dealing with on a daily basis. And I saw this coming from literally the minute they started the isolation. I was like, I've seen this happen to the veteran community. It's still happening to the veteran community. You know, the minute that someone leaves the military who has spent, you know, their entire career there, everything gets taken away from them, their identity, their income, you know, their sense of who they are. And then all of a sudden they sit at home, they're doing nothing, they become isolated, they usually get put on antidepressants, you know, and a lot of the time painkillers and opiates, all these things. And they literally can't move from their couch. They are certainly not engaged with their families or with their children. I speak from experience because I've been in this situation. I used to come home to my former partner. He would be sitting in front of a blank freaking TV screen, drool coming out of his mouth because he was completely dosed to the eyeballs on these drugs. And that's what they are. They're drugs. They're not good for you. It's not medicine. It's drugs. So when I saw this whole let's go into isolation, I was like, mental illness is going to skyrocket from this.
Yeah, I saw the exact same sort of thing. And like, I mean, I've witnessed it all around me, and I think probably everyone else has. It's like, it's a mood.
It is.
And to me, whether COVID's real or not, I think this isolation is going to kill more people
absolutely
than COVID
100%.
And maybe not physically, but mentally, I think this is going to do damage that we have no idea.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
it has huge repercussions that we have not even begun to look at. I know that the government, they've put out their ads being like, hey, like, keep up with your mental health and get outside, but it's not enough.
Watches TV.
Yeah,
I haven't seen that ad.
I see them on Spotify, I guess. Like, I hear them, I guess. But it's few and far between. You don't really hear a great deal of it. And just I don't feel like there's being enough done for mental illness.
You've done far more lobbying than we have in our lifetime. How do you think we go about getting this medical and like getting all of these ideas out and actually lobbying other than writing to our local MPs?
Yeah.
Where do we go?
The problem with the local MPs is that or even the state MPs, in Queensland there was a QPC report that was about decriminalising drugs. It was sent up to the Labor government. They were like, all of this is true, but we're not going to do it.
Yeah.
So, like, feeling pretty useless. Like, what can we actually do?
Yeah. To me, I feel like the only thing we've got left is people power. People coming together, just first of all, doing it anyway.
No. But now we can't even congregate.
You have an excellent point there. The only thing that in my head that comes to mind is that like there's a lot of groups in the last 2 years since I've been away. There has been so many groups have been popping up online on Instagram and things like that with their pretty little images and stuff like that. I cannot believe how many of them are advocating for the pharmaceutical route. And it's like, you have no idea. If you were around in 2015 and 2016 when, certainly the conferences started and all this, like the talk happened, certainly Dan Haslam was in the news. If you were around in that time, you would not be advocating for this pharmaceutical industry. And it is appalling that they are, so the only thing I can think of is that, all of these groups come together, you guys included, as like all these little education groups and all these little hemp, businesses and whatever have to come together and just be like, no, we are not going to continue to go down this pharmaceutical route. We are not going to advocate for this, and the same for doctors. Doctors need to be doing the same thing. Obviously,
how do we reach
they aren't.
Doctors?
There are doctors who are on board already. There are doctors, cannabis doctors, in Queensland that I've heard that talk to patients about the black market and what they can get from the black market. We need those doctors to be standing up a lot more and to be like speaking for their patients.
Honestly, it would be really cool if you could have some kind of international or whatever, just like a grouping of people in a club, doctors, patients, consumers, producers, and they're people who are just advocates of legalization, decriminalisation in Australia in the right ways, not making it corporate, not making it bureaucratic.
That's what I don't know how to do. I don't know how to keep the corporate companies out because I've seen, certainly when I first arrived in Oregon, they were a lot more independent mom and pop dispensaries as well as businesses, as well as farms. But by the end of by the time I left, that was not you did have huge businesses, huge companies, multinational companies coming in and just buying them all up,
it's unfair.
Which it is. It certainly in the likes of, Oregon, there is still like a boutique
artisan kind of thing.
Yeah. And but you have to support those ones. And that's what I'm saying here in Australia. Like, that's why we have to support our growers and our dealers, because they're taking so much risk.
And a lot of them can't enter into legal industry.
Exactly.
Even if they wanted
There's
to.
no pathway. So this black market's being forced on it.
Yeah. So I've worked in this industry for many years now. I have legal experience. And for me to get a job here in the pharmaceutical industry, it was so hard for me to.
Yeah.
And because they're not looking for people with cannabis backgrounds, they're looking for people with pharmaceutical backgrounds. Pharmaceutical reps, people who have worked in a GMP facility,
right.
So none of those, like, I'm not included in any of those things.
Have the right quals. Kind of thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
What I know how to do is how to grow quality cannabis and how to talk to people about what, like, pairing patients with medicine.
Which honestly, I think qualifies you more, but.
Absolutely it does. The other thing that these companies are also doing is that, the legislation actually has what they call a fit and proper person, thing that every employee has to fit within. So our cannabis companies, our legal cannabis companies are testing all of their employees for cannabis. And if they have cannabis in their systems, they are not allowed to work there.
Holy shit.
Because that does not make them a fit and proper person.
No way.
Can you believe that that's actually even what the government is referring to that as? Like,
that's so bullshit.
It is disgusting.
Yeah.
So,
and the fact that the thing that makes that growing acceptable is that they have the proper forms, basically.
Exactly.
There's nothing that separates.
And also, I don't want to say anything bad about those who are working for these cannabis companies. I genuinely believe, certainly for the company that I worked for, the growers there and the people who work there are cannabis lovers. They genuinely want to produce a good quality product.
Yep.
However, the Office of Drug Control, the ODC, and the TGA are not allowing that. So these companies have to grow within a certain, standard and in a certain way and all these things. And it's like, you're not growing a quality product when you're following what the ODC and the TGA, two organizations that have no concept about what cannabis medicine actually is or how to grow a good quality product. Yeah. You're following what they say. Like, what? No. These companies need to be saying, fuck you, ODC. We're going to do it this way because our patients are is what comes first.
Great point.
And the other thing is that these companies should not be sending their product off overseas like a WA company recently has done before we've even looked after our own patients
Domestic
here in
marketing,
Australia. Yeah. I think that's disgusting. That is
agree.
not right. And for the government to even stand there and think and actually say, Australia is going to lead the world in cannabis medicine, you're fucking joking.
Dreaming if you can't develop your own industry here.
Truly.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. Like, there's so many ways to just like break this down in horrific detail, because I think that people have lived experiences that are just terrifying. They've got some sort of condition that they're dealing with, and they're constantly dealing with the stress of having to engage with this system.
Yeah.
But like, how do we, like, you've been over in the US, what really excites you about being in that space where a lot of opportunities and possibilities are opening up? Like, what would you like to see happen here that has already happened in those spaces?
Well, first of all, living in a state or in a city where cannabis is legal, it is so easy to find your community.
Yeah,
and that is important. When you are a sick person, and actually I found this, I'll refer this to veterans. I found that when veterans had a safe place to meet and to talk about what they were using, God, that in itself is almost healing and medicinal in a therapeutic, And so that, allowing and having these opportunities to talk so much more openly, to find your people, to find your communities, that is so important. Yeah. And so definitely in Portland, in Oregon, all around the States, there are so many groups like that, but also I think it is just so important, I feel, that we actually go towards a dispensary model.
Yep.
Anyone over the age of 18, 21, whatever the age is, should be able to walk into a store and just be able to have a conversation with someone and be like and have a huge variety of different medicines
Right there.
on offer.
Yeah.
Just like you can go to your pharmacy and and get that and get right. You should be able to talk to a specialist, knowledgeable person on cannabis and be able to walk out with that without being afraid that you're going to be arrested or that you're going to get in trouble for it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Same goes with driving. I just don't, even here in the pharmaceutical, like if you are prescribed a pharmaceutical product, if you're pulled up, you still could lose your license.
Yep.
That is insane to me. How, again, this is not a government that has legalized this medicine and is keeping patients as number one, because
Not
if that's
even keeping them safe.
they're not even keeping, exactly.
Yeah. No,
Exactly.
there's something really fucked up about the way that they test people for impairment, but they don't. So they're saying, oh, this person can't be on the road. But honestly, it's just that they've picked up THC in their saliva.
Exactly.
So that could be
It's
something.
not impairment.
No, I mean, they could have smoked 2 days ago. It could be in their saliva. You know?
Absolutely.
It's ridiculous.
And I have so many patients who are concerned about that. Like that they're like, oh, but what happens if I am picked up? I'm like, well, you have to sort of almost
Deal with it,
decide what's more important, like how you're feeling or the fact that maybe, and so many of them say, I've never been picked up before. So, a lot of them, do say, oh, look, I'm just going to risk it. And I'm like, well, that is on you. I hate that. But they're the conversations that we're having to have with people,
Which is
and that's
ridiculous,
anybody.
True.
Fab will have something soon to help those people.
We're actually doing a thing this afternoon, which is a bit of a non-scientific test of some of these swabs that we've got here. So we'll be using a couple of different home remedies to figure out whether there are any ways to actually beat these drug tests. If you know yourself that you can actually get onto the road and you don't have like major impairment because you aren't stoned as hell and you just want to go down the road but you smoked 4 hours ago, then we're going to figure out which is better, like Listerine strips or apple cider vinegar. Basically.
Nice. Love it.
It'll be an interesting one. I think we want to frame this article to be like how these filthy stoners are getting away with driving on the road.
Reefer madness.
I mean, the one way that I like to sort of tell people obviously when we're smoking or vaping or anything like that, it's not working. But if we're using an oil, just put it in a capsule, swallow it,
Good call.
If where there's a will, there's a way, right?
Absolutely. You can get empty caps at Chemist Warehouse.
Exactly. It's so easy to do it.
It's for your vitamins.
Exactly.
I don't know why, but I like when people say it, vitamins. I'm used to vitamins, but vitamins.
And I mean, another way that we don't actually talk about too much, but certainly when we're talking medicine, suppositories, pessary, that's another way that you can certainly get medicine into you.
Pete first introduced me to the idea of the suppository, and I was just
Nice.
like cracked up. It's like up the bum, eh?
Well, that's actually what I taught Pete how to make was pessary suppositories. So we actually had those conversations ourselves.
Full circle.
Yes. Yep. Yep. So it's good times.
Shout out, Petey.
Yeah. Love you, Pete. Love your work.
But
Good mate.
we've got a lot to cover, like in Australia. Like there is so much that needs to be done, and for me, I mean, I'm like, I guess one of the thought leaders, along with Mitch, in the community of like, we're one of the few websites that actually puts out content, so people can find it. The trouble I notice with like other groups and communities and such like that, they're normally just Facebook, Instagram, so you need to be found on there. You couldn't find them through a Google search and such. So that's where we've kind of positioned ourselves, and as a result, we do get a really sizable amount of readers, which is great, which has been why the PGR movement's gone. But I think the biggest thing is, how do we get ego out of every group to somehow come together to agree on what needs to go and how to actually lobby and poll for it? That's the whole thing. Like, I had my Better Letters idea. I don't know if you know that.
Yeah.
We had a chat about that like a year or so ago. So like, that's one of those things that I think could help.
Sometimes I think it's about listening. Like being able to understand that people are coming just by definition from a different perspective than you. And while you can provide them with value, the best way to figure out how to do that is actually to figure out where they are at, to tune into their reality, which might be very different to yours.
So somehow, one by one, we've got to get all these fuckers, figure them out, figure out how to help them, then figure out how we can help each other, and then we do it.
It's being able to weave these relationships together, which I think everyone's doing anyhow.
We need to get a big board in here, and we can go like fucking CSI
conspiracy
style, like,
theory.
Okay, so we connect the MCU
pins and strings
here, and then we grab the doctors' union here.
Cool.
Yeah.
It'd be awesome.
You've got it.
Connect the dots.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. It's a tough one. I don't know how to get everyone on board, to be honest.
It's really hard. Like,
it is.
the thing we noticed when we've got, well, actually, I don't think you came. I did. There was like a rally out in Brisbane. I don't know. It was like last year sometime or the year before. And it was run by the Pirate Party and the Liberal Democrats.
Yeah.
Right. And there was probably about 50, 60 people that showed up.
Wow, that's actually a pretty big turnout.
Good turnout
for
cannabis.
cannabis. Yeah. I mean, 2016, you'd
Maybe it's a
lucky to
little
get
less.
15.
That's right.
I might be wrong there. It might have been a bit less. It might have even been 40. But anyway, about 40-ish. And it was all right. But what you tend to notice when you go to these rallies, particularly in Queensland, I know Sydney and Victoria, Melbourne kind of ways, it's a bit different. They're a bit more open there.
Yeah.
But here in Queensland, everyone's terrified.
Yes.
So the only people that show up are your kind of political thought leaders and like their associates. And then you've got a few people like the Her Highness girls came and that. But generally, you kind of have the real cannabis enthusiasts. And whether or not you like the stoner stereotype, but that's what gets shown. And that's, I think, probably the biggest thing. No one that's a professional is coming out. No one in that vein is really making their voice heard. And I think that's the sad thing here. We're not getting the true users of cannabis represented when we're being shown.
100%, which is, again, it's like, you know, if you are a professional, if you were just someone who uses, you've got to come out of the closet. You've got to start telling people and talking about it, even if you are just using recreationally, because at the end of the day, even when you're using recreationally, you're still getting medicine. It's still a good thing. You know, so we just need to have, and trust me, there are politicians out there who are using. There are politicians out there who are buying cannabis for their sick loved ones.
There are
police officers who are doing that.
Yep.
And yet we still have police officers who will follow the law and continue to bust drug dealers. Well, sorry, cannabis dealers.
I call them medicine men.
Medicine men, yes, and women. It's absolutely appalling, again, that we also have police officers doing that. And again, that we have police officers using the drug tests. No, you should, like, just say no. We need to be using that campaign. Just say no. But to police officers, like, seriously, guys, like, you've got to stop cracking down. On patients, on those who are.
It becomes a matter of like.
I wonder if you could run an ad.
There are some people who really fear what could happen to them, and I think that's what keeps the whole system in control in general, because people really do fear legal consequences, being thrown in jail, that kind of thing.
Absolutely.
And so,
but then they're so happy. Trust me, I've dealt with this, and it has. It certainly plays on my mind, like certainly when I was working with Weeded Warrior, is that we were giving medicine to so many veterans, and so many of them were too scared to say anything or do anything about it, but they were more than happy to keep calling us up and being like, hey, we need more medicine. And I was like, well, the whole idea is here that you guys have been introduced to cannabis, and now you've got to take care of it yourself and start your little co-op groups, you know, with your other local veterans or whatever. Like, you've got to start working together, but you cannot continue to put the risk on us when we want to help more people, but we only have a certain amount that we can. So now it's on you. You have to start looking after and taking control. Trust me, I hated saying that, because I also can understand that these are sick people who shouldn't be having to look after their own medicine.
That's right.
You know, so
I think with regards to the veterans, you know, their fear is definitely their pensions being taken and things like that.
Pensions will never be taken, but jail time could certainly be done, and it certainly fucks up their PTSD and you know, their anxiety far more, and their social anxiety. You know, I couldn't think of a worse place for a veteran to be in prison, or, and I've seen this with my former partner, to go through the court system with it. It is absolutely appalling that they are making veterans do that, you know. And certainly in his case, he had police turn up, and he straight away was like, I'm a veteran, I'm growing medicinally, I'm only growing for myself, which he was. And you know, they still came in and took everything, and I'm like, that, like, those police officers, not just those ones, but many police officers all around Australia are going to be using this medicine one day. They're probably already using it. Like, I actually know many police officers who already are. But they're going to be using it, and in the future, for their own traumas, and, you know, to certainly help them piece the pieces back together with their families. So to me, it's like, you've got to stop the shit now. You know, and I used to say to them, like, you guys don't even deserve this. Like, I'd be like, if you just stop doing this now, like, I will help you. I will teach you everything I know, but you have to stop cracking down on people, you know. But that's their job, and that's what they're paid to do.
For as long as they're a police officer, that's what they're encouraged to do.
Yeah.
And you know what? At the end of the day, I think that it would be a lot easier for this message to be communicated if we had some kind of you know, broader political power and representation. The closest thing we've got to it is the hemp party. We don't have any representation in the Senate or Parliament.
No.
We don't have any grassroots movement that's really able to make a lot of noise about the fact that there's fucked up shit happening. And every time that we make gains, they're co-opted by the government, you know, with the medicinal cannabis stuff. Like, we were close to making massive gains on that, and it's been years of stagnation since.
So many. Yeah. I mean, 2016 is when it was like legalized, that, you know, and publicized, that people could go to their doctors and have it prescribed. It is not that easy.
No.
You know, and like I said, back to the beginning, 30,000 scripts on the like medicinal cannabis model. Like, there are so many more Australians who need this medicine, which is
So
like,
true.
and it's clearly evident by how the black market is being run.
Not only is it exorbitant in terms of its price, it's also deeply inaccessible when you can't find someone who will prescribe it to you.
Yeah.
And that's incredibly hard when you live in a regional area. Have you ever seen High as Mike? Have you seen that
Yes,
documentary?
yeah.
That was really good.
Honestly, like, that's a great reflection of I think a lot of the general experience when you go out into the kind of sticks, you know what I mean? Because in the city you might be able to find a cannabis doctor, maybe,
If you're lucky, yeah.
if you're lucky, you know.
But then, yeah, once you go regionally, you've got
You're fucked.
no chance. Yeah. It's not good. You know, and even in those areas, like, you're not necessarily getting a quality product even from the black market.
Right. So there you go. It's very difficult to see cannabis as a medicine.
Yeah.
When your experience with it is, you know, some really shitty hydro.
Yeah.
You know, something like that.
Yeah.
You know, yeah.
That's a big one.
Yeah.
The other thing that I think that's really frustrating me about, you know, we can't honestly sit here and think that, you know, the politicians and our government is doing a good thing by legalizing cannabis and allowing it to happen when they've made it so difficult. And during this COVID, they're still keeping bottle shops open.
Yep,
they're still
sure.
considering them to be
For mental
essential.
health, right? Yeah.
Yeah, right. And it's crazy because then they're stopping people from getting cannabis. They're taking our dealers off the streets, but still totally advocating for alcohol to be okay.
I really think we should look up some statistics on hospitalizations and things like relating to domestic violence since lockdown.
I
want to see those numbers.
Across the board,
Alcohol-related
across the
violence.
board, those numbers have increased.
100%.
And it's not just
I would
in
wanna know how
Australia.
much.
No,
It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wish I could tell you specifically, but
Yeah.
like,
That would be a good
man.
piece. That would be a really, really good piece to run.
Yeah.
Because it's pretty crazy. It's always been just my always like what the fuck moment is like, how is it that you can get blind fucking drunk but you can't get a little stoned?
Right.
And the biggest thing is like, you know, the ad that triggers me probably more than anything from the government is gamble responsibly. It's like, if you can gamble responsibly, you should be able to smoke responsibly, right?
Totally.
There's a
And-
deep inconsistency when it comes to the principles of how the laws are enforced.
Yeah.
Because, yeah, obviously, like, alcohol is a very hard drug. In fact, withdrawal can kill you.
Yeah.
Binge drinking can kill you. You know, these are things that happen all the time.
Yeah.
So it's kind of weird to think that I mean, not only cannabis, but psychedelics, entheogens like MDMA, dissociatives like ketamine and nitrous oxide. For some reason, we don't see the medicinal benefits of all of these drugs, or even the recreational benefits of these drugs. You know, like, there are plenty of people who go out and do it anyway, and God bless them. But the problem is that all of the risks are being placed upon them from a society that doesn't acknowledge that it's a thing, you know? It's obvious that it's a thing. We've been doing, like, the weird thing is that cannabis is ingrained within, much like alcohol, how there's this legacy of human use in history and culture and religion and etc. It's the same thing when you go back into, you know, the Indian subcontinent. You have all of these stories of, like, Shiva, the god of fucking cannabis. You know what I mean? There's so many different ways in which this stuff is, like, part of our past and part of who we are. So we're just denying it, you know, we're denying it to ourselves.
Absolutely.
Got to wake up.
You can get absolutely drunk and then you can still go gamble. I don't understand.
It's all legal, baby. In fact,
You're
we're building a
literally
new casino,
impaired,
a
and they're like,
massive
gamble
fucking
responsibly,
casino.
yet you're impaired.
I can't wait to go to Queen's Wharf and just, like, spend the entire day at the pokies. And I won't be able to tell what time it is either because there's no clocks in there. It's beautiful.
I reckon we need to, like, write up, like, how we want shit legalized. Like, are you allowed to smoke in public places? Or is it particular, or is it licensed? Or, like, should there be pot clubs, you know?
Well, I can
ask
tell
these
you
questions.
from living in Portland, you know, it wasn't legal to use out in the street.
Yeah.
But it was like...
It just did.
Yeah. And you know what I never... Well, I mean, now currently Portland is a war zone, but that's because of Donald Trump. So, certainly before that, walking down the street, no one would bat an eyelid. And people weren't going fucking crazy, you know. People were very respectful in that place. In fact, like, there was this, like, kind of unspoken kind of thing that, like, you wouldn't smoke walking around restaurants. You certainly wouldn't smoke around schools. If you saw a family walking by, you would definitely put it out. Like, everyone was so respectful about using cannabis out publicly. But I never once heard of anyone being pulled over for it, or, like, you know, or having police, like, write a ticket for it.
I had
Nothing.
a very similar experience in Amsterdam.
Yeah.
Like, it's not legal to smoke there.
Decriminalized. Though.
Yeah, it's barely even decriminalized. It's such a weird grey, like, it doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
It's like, you're allowed to sell it in the coffee shops, but you're not allowed to buy it anywhere.
Yeah. And you're not
weirdest
allowed to
thing
be a
about it-
distributor of it either.
The government's so, like, ambiguous about it, and just, they're like, oh yeah, we allow the coffee shops to exist because if we shut them down, people would be very angry. But we're not going to, like, support them in any way. So we're going to, like, a lot of the coffee shops, I believe, in the past 15 years have actually shut down. Like,
There wasn't too many, but there was still plenty.
Yeah.
I went 3 years ago, almost to the day.
Yeah, right.
Go back maybe 8 days. But what I found was, you couldn't smoke in public, but people did, but generally, like, in bigger, wider open spaces where, like, they weren't people passing by. Because
But even when I was there, they would have, like, tables out the front of the coffee shop. So you definitely could.
In those,
you know?
outside there, yes.
Yeah.
But, like, in terms of, like, on the streets
Yeah.
and stuff, I didn't see it too much. People did do it, and I did it myself, but it was always... You just kind of kept it to yourself when it was, like, a quiet period.
It was almost just a respect. Like, it was, you know, like, they respect the fact that they're allowed to do it, and that, you know, so and this is the same with Portland, you know, people were just respectful of, like, being able, they don't want it taken back off them again, so they're going to be respectful about it, and obviously responsible. I never saw... Like, people didn't go crazy. It wasn't like riots on the street. It wasn't like that the whole place shut down and no one could go to work. Like, people weren't turning into bums there. It was a very productive city.
They only went mad when they stopped getting money, basically. When they lost all their jobs and then had to stay home. You know what I mean? And then there was the whole, like, police brutality, Black Lives Matter thing.
Which I think is probably, like, part of... Even the conversation we could be having now here in Australia,
Totally.
we could like legalizing cannabis and having dispensaries.
It's a big part of getting rid of that non-violent drug.
Absolutely. It also takes, you know, it means that Black lives here in Australia aren't, you know, the Indigenous people who are prosecuted for cannabis is far higher than, you know.
They're just profiled for it.
Absolutely, they are. You know,
And
so
it's not just Indigenous folks, also the Black African communities.
absolutely,
Any form of minority, really.
for sure. Yeah,
But yeah, the Indigenous definitely.
They call it.
Yeah, they really do. And yeah, I think that, again, even as we, or if we go down a dispensary model, these are the things that we need to be keeping in mind,
Totally.
you know, because that's not something that, as legalization has happened in America, they've completely, you know, just gone like stepped over all like the minority groups.
Yeah. If anything, they should be the ones growing and doing a lot of the
Absolutely.
industry stuff.
Absolutely. Yes. And yeah, so same here. You know, we should definitely be including our Indigenous people in these conversations. Certainly, you know, our Indigenous people should most certainly be using cannabis as opposed to pharmaceutical drugs to treat their all of their health issues. And hey, cannabis is really great for addiction, so they should definitely be using it for alcohol and all the things that they have issues with in their communities. That's being brought on by white people, you know, and introduced by white people. We need to be going back to cannabis and introducing that.
I'm just thinking like branding wise, like Yandi Kush, Yandi Haze. Like I would buy that.
There's actually a couple of Aussie strains that I think you could really go down that route.
You could have so much fun.
Heavy
with that.
Aussie marketing, you know.
Yeah. But at the same time, it should be Indigenous people who are owning that.
They should be in control.
Yes. Absolutely.
Totally.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. It's like this argument about like land rights and occupancy. Like that wasn't something that was thrust upon the Europeans by the Indigenous. The Europeans came here with their land titles and their flags and said, this is our land, not yours, and we're going to use it in the way that we please, and then created an economy on top of it. And in some ways, now that we're running into ecological limits, lots of different problems because we don't know how to manage the environment around us, it's leading to degradation and all of these problems. We actually require the Indigenous wisdom that we've been ignoring for the past 250 years. Like, if anything, having them as stewards and as part of developing a kind of like cohesive, multicultural, kind of like integrated society. Yeah. Because there's no way to move forward without their knowledge, their understanding. They are the ones who have been here for thousands of years.
Yeah.
They're the ones that are going to allow us to continue to be here for thousands of years. So in that way, yeah, like we've got a lot of work to do, and a lot of these issues, they intersect. Like cannabis doesn't seem like a big thing, but it impacts people's lives in all of these different dimensions.
To me, cannabis legalization would be the biggest impact you could do in the world.
It's a clinch issue. Like it's a bit like healthcare, universal healthcare. If people were able to like just get sick help, you know what I mean? The massive impact that would make on people's lives. I think it's the same with cannabis.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Well, I mean, if we have universal health care, I mean, cannabis should be frontline treatment.
Totally.
You know, before we even go to pharmaceuticals, it should be the very first thing, the first line treatment. Honestly, I believe that cannabis, particularly CBD and one-to-one type things, should be in our ambulances. The minute, like I said to you guys earlier before we started this conversation, I had a car accident last year. You know, that I'm still suffering from, you know, from my concussion that I had. I was very lucky that in my car that day, I was actually coming home and I had some one-to-one oil in my car. So 10, 15 minutes after the car accident, I was dosing because I could barely see straight, you know, and within minutes I felt better, you know. So to me, all of our ambulances should be there, and it should be used for shock, for concussions, you know, for car accidents. And I can't understand why we don't have health professionals actually arguing for this one, because it doesn't take a freaking rocket scientist to figure out that it's far safer than anything that they're currently using.
Someone's just got to take that risk upon themselves.
Yeah.
In some sense.
And I get it. It's scary.
It is scary.
I've been there, you know, and there's plenty of people like me who have been there. Like, why does it come to ordinary, you know, nobodies to be the ones stepping up? Because it just doesn't make sense. If you're really an expert,
you should be advocating for this.
Absolutely.
Kind of thing.
Absolutely. Yep. Yep.
I think that's a good place to wrap up.
Thanks so much for your insight. It'd be great to
Thanks for having me, guys.
do this again sometime.
Yeah, thanks. I love to talk cannabis, and
don't we all?
It's a good match.
Yeah, it's been fun.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
See you later.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.